Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xi Zhi. Coming up in this edition, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced he's stepping down after 9 years in the job. The US Congress has officially confirmed Donald Trump as the winner of the 2024 presidential election. And Palestinian sources say the latest round of Israeli airstrikes over Gaza have killed at least 19 Palestinians. We begin in North America. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is stepping down after 9 years in the job. He has been the Liberal Party leader for more than a decade. He said he made the decision due to infighting within his party.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
Trudeau added that he will stay on as Prime Minister until the Liberal Party chooses its next leader. Local media reported that Trudeau is facing a revolt within his caucus and dismal public opinion polls, which indicate that his party is likely to be swept from power by the Conservatives in an election. Evangelos Sipsis reports from Toronto.
The day tomorrow, let's so say, is quite interesting because we don't know what will happen. One thing that we do know is that the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will still stay in spot, will still be the leader of the Liberal Party and the Canadian Prime Minister until there will be a new leader of the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party now has 90 days to start their campaigns, and needs 90 days from today to be able to announce a leader. There's been a number of people that have come forward, like LeBlanc, who currently is the Finance Minister of Canada, but also Mark Carney, who is the former Governor of Canada. But one interesting name that has been popping a lot today is Chrystia Freeland herself, the woman, the Finance Minister who resigned just the day before the 2025 budget. And she is the one actually that has the most percentage points of leading the Liberal Party. So that's pretty much of what will happen in the next day of the Liberal Party itself and who's going to be the leader. Now, if someone does get elected, it will lead the country as being the Prime Minister until the elections will happen. And we have to remind the people here that 2025 is the year of elections here in Canada. So a lot will be taking place in the next few days, the next few weeks, and the next few months. But the one thing here for sure is that it only can go two ways. Either it's a revised political landscape here in Canada, a renewal political landscape, or it can open to the door to more political turmoil in a country that has been pretty much stable.
That is Evangelos Sipsis on the resignation of the Canadian Prime Minister. In the United States, Congress has officially confirmed Donald Trump as the winner of the 2024 presidential election. The certification came years after Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election result. From Washington, D.C., here's Nathan King.
What a difference 4 years makes. 4 years ago, remember, there was a riot or an insurrection or a coup attempt, as some people call it, after Donald Trump falsely said that he won the election, that actually Joe Biden did. This time, after Trump actually did win, for a second time, peaceful certification of the votes, and hardly a word spoken about January the 6th inside the Capitol Rotunda. Last time, of course, rioters were shouting, "Hang Mike Pence," the then Vice President, who, in his role as President of the Senate, was there to certify the election results. Well, he went into hiding in the Capitol complex. Now, peacefully, the now Vice President, acting in her role as the President of the Senate, Kamala Harris, who lost the election, presided over the proceedings and read out the results from the Electoral College. Let's take a listen.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 312 votes. Kamala D. Harris.
So no complaints from Republicans this time. They now control both houses of Congress, and the presidency come January the 20th. Big legislative agenda, immigration, anti-immigration push, extending tax cuts and more. But of course, memories of January 6, 2021 still fresh in the minds of Washington, the US and the world. Over 100 police officers were injured that day and there were several deaths, and 1,000 people have been convicted, with hundreds more still facing prosecution. It was the biggest investigation in the history of the US Justice Department, and of course there was loads of evidence. Judges handed down their sentence, but the now incoming US President Donald Trump calls them hostages.
We will treat those people from January 6th fairly. We will treat them fairly. And if it requires pardons, we will give them pardons, because they are being treated so unfairly.
So one of his first acts could be to pardon some of those convicted 4 years ago. He's also talked of prosecuting people who, of course, impeached him afterwards. And remember the January 6th congressional hearings. 4 years on, we may have had a much more peaceful handover of power in the Congress, but the issue will dog American politics and history for years and decades to come.
That was Nathan King reporting from the US Capitol. Staying in America, blizzards and snowfall have hit the eastern and southern parts of the country, resulting in power outages and travel disruptions. The weather has also killed at least 5 people. Owen Fairclough is in Washington, D.C.
Winter's first big bite of 2025. Almost the entire eastern two-thirds of the country buried by a blizzard that brought record snowfall to some regions. Despite repeated warnings to stay off the roads, drivers were trapped in places like Kansas City, Missouri, where freezing temperatures were forecast to drop as low as 7 degrees Celsius or 12 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. In Virginia, emergency services responded to some 200 vehicle crashes. And Washington, D.C. has almost pretty much ground to a halt. Apart from emergency workers clearing snow, there is very little traffic in this area, making it into the downtown or indeed out of the city. Washington Latin School. Now, at this time of day, the field there would be teeming with kids at recess. But every school in the District of Columbia, as well as in neighbouring Maryland and Virginia, has been closed due to this snow blizzard. And the federal government, the US federal government, is also pretty much at a standstill this Monday. Workers being told to telework. Apart from emergency workers, they're expected to try and brave the conditions to keep the city functioning. As well as lawmakers certifying Donald Trump as the next president, while outgoing President Joe Biden was able to jet to New Orleans to join a service for those killed in the terror attack. Meteorologists say melting Arctic ice caps driven by climate change are to blame for driving a polar vortex south, with the storm forecast to extend into Tuesday for many areas. And the blizzard isn't isolated to the US. Southern Ireland, Northern England and Germany also suffering similar impacts on travel a day before the US.
That was Owen Fairclough reporting. Moving on to the Middle East. Palestinian sources say the latest round of Israeli airstrikes over Gaza has killed at least 19 Palestinians. The Al-Adha hospital says an Israeli drone dropped a bomb near a school housing displaced people west of the Al-Nusayrat camp in central Gaza. The attack injured 40 people, mostly children. Rami Al-Maghari has the latest from the Strip.
The latest strikes in Gaza. This comes against the backdrop of continued Israeli army actions across different parts of the Gaza Strip, including the latest from Khan Yunis near the Kuwaiti hospital, the field Kuwaiti hospital, where 4 people were killed by an Israeli war plane. That's what has been reported recently. The latest update. Another update is from the Nusayrat refugee camp, where a school was hit by a quadcopter or a small attack drone. In the Nusayrat refugee camp, number of people were injured in that shelter school. Another strike hit another home in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza City. These are actions that the Israeli army is continuing to take in the territory while the ceasefire talks are continuing. Palestinians over the past several months have been been very looking forward to having or to realizing or to seeing this agreement taking into effect in the territory, as they are in much need for relief and for their situation to get improved. Actually, the people's expectations are high here in the territory. Optimism and pessimism, whether there will be an agreement in the upcoming days or the agreement will be delayed until the President-elect of the United States come in power.
That was Rami Amagari in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israel says it has received no new information from Hamas regarding a potential hostage release. Hamas has said that the group is ready to free 34 hostages in the first stage of a deal with Israel. The group has not clarified the conditions of the hostages. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
It was classified as a list given by Hamas to Israel of people that they're willing to free, but no, it is not exactly clear who is alive and who is not alive. Later on, the Israeli Prime Minister's office releasing a statement saying that this list was actually handed from Israel to Hamas a few months ago and was described as a humanitarian list. Why so? It includes the women, the children, the elderly who are still captive, and also 11 people who are under the age of 50 but were not taken hostage as soldiers. And now Hamas has approved the list. But Hamas is unwilling to say who is alive and who is not alive. Hamas is saying that they need at least a week of ceasefire to determine who is alive and who is not, because some of the hostages are held by other organizations in other places of the Gaza Strip, and Hamas cannot verify their condition. So a lot of controversy regarding this list. We do know that the families of the hostages, who are very stressed any day, are extremely stressed today. They're calling this list as a sort of a selection, a very difficult word, saying that some hostages will be freed and others will remain in Gaza to die. Therefore, they're calling on the government to embrace a deal which will bring everybody, even if it would require some very big prices from Israel.
That was Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Turning to Africa, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has visited Namibia, the first stop of his ongoing trip to Africa. He has met several top officials of the country. This year marks the 35th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries. Wang Yi said bilateral cooperation has immense potential for the future. Wang Jiamunga has more.
On his first tour of Africa in 2025, China's top diplomat Wang Yi met Namibia's President Nangolo Mumba in Swakopmund in the capital Windhoek. Wang Yi said China-Africa relations have stood the test of the international situation and presented new bright prospects. He said China has always been a reliable partner of Africa and has always placed Africa in a prioritized and important position overall. At last year's Forum on China-Africa Cooperation held in Beijing, China, President Xi made a commitment to strengthen synergy with Namibia and accelerate the implementation of the outcomes of the FOCAC summit so as to make new progress in the China-Namibia Comprehensive Strategic Cooperative Partnership. On his part, the Namibian president highlighted that his country is willing to strengthen inter-party cooperation with China and exchange experience on governance. He reiterated that Namibia supports the Beijing Declaration on Action Plan adopted at last year's FOCAC summit and looks forward to taking concrete measures to expand cooperation in infrastructure, digital economy, energy, agriculture, education, and other areas to enhance the well-being of the two peoples. He said Namibia is firmly in support of President Xi's 3 initiatives, including Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative. In Windhoek, the capital, Wang Yi met with the incoming President Nandi Ndaitwah, where he delivered the congratulatory message from President Xi Jinping on her election as president in last month's election and for being the first female president-elect in Namibia.
That was Wang Jiamunga reporting. Finally, in Europe, Austrian President Alexander Van der Bellen has tasked Freedom Party leader Herbert Kickl with forming a new government. This comes after coalition talks without the party collapsed. The far-right Freedom Party has previously served as a junior coalition partner but has never led a government. It won the parliamentary presidency in September by securing around 29% of the vote. From Vienna, here's Johannes Pleshberger.
Let's say this definitely was not an easy one for President Alexander Van der Bellen to task Herbert Kickl with forming a government. He tried to avoid this at almost all costs, but he had no alternative. The only alternative would have been snap elections, something Austria really doesn't need right now, given the economic slowdown and the rising debt. Alexander Van der Bellen, Austria's president, he's sort of a figure representing a vast majority of Austrians who did not vote for the Freedom Party. Alexander Van der Bellen is a former leader of the Green Party, and but there's this other part of Austrians, around 30% who voted for the Freedom Party. They feel left alone by the establishment, by the mainstream parties. They feel like the government does not handle well the economic slowdown, the debt, and also immigration, Islamic immigration. They feel like the Austrian identity, the Christian identity is fading away. So the Freedom Party is representing this part of Austrians, a minority, but most Austrians agree there was no alternative to giving them the mandate to form a government. It's almost set in stone now that there will be a Freedom Party chancellor, a coalition with Austria's conservatives. It's almost set in stone, and most Austrians agree that there was no alternative. This will happen now, and if the Freedom Party would have not been made part of this government, many experts say that the upcoming elections, the next elections in future, the Freedom Party would have gotten even more votes, maybe the absolute majority. So this is happening now, and we've already heard voices also from Germany. German politicians like Markus Söder, conservative CSU party leader, who said this is a warning to Germany. Something similar could happen in Germany, and the mainstream parties should align to, as other German politicians said, to avoid the far right from rising also in Germany.
That was Johannes Pleshberger in Vienna. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced that he's stepping down after 9 years in the job. The US Congress has officially confirmed Donald Trump as the winner of the 2024 presidential election. And Palestinian sources have said the latest round of Israeli airstrikes over Gaza have killed at least 19 Palestinians. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, our 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.